At 06:35 on June 11, 1945, Lieutenant Richard McCool stood in the conning tower of USS LCS-122, tracking three Japanese VAL dive bombers closing fast through broken clouds 65 miles north of Okinawa. 23 years old, 6 weeks on Radar Picket Station 15, 0 ships lost under his command. The Japanese had already sent 18 kamikazes against his station in the past 72 hours. McCool commanded a landing craft support ship, 158 feet long, 23 feet wide, crew of 65 men. Most Navy officers called them pallbearers, small amphibious gunboats designed to screen destroyers from suicide attacks. 5 twin 40mm guns, 4 20mm cannons, and 120 rockets mounted in launchers across the deck. If fire reached those rockets, the entire ship would explode in seconds. The Battle of Okinawa had entered its third month. More than 12,000 American servicemen dead. Japanese kamikaze pilots had sunk 36 Allied ships and damaged 368 more. Radar picket duty was the most dangerous assignment in the Pacific theater. Ships positioned in a wide circle around Okinawa to detect incoming attacks. Destroyers carried the radar. LCS ships like McCool's provided the guns. Station 15 sat northwest of Okinawa, closest to the Japanese home islands, first to be hit. McCool's ship had been on station since May 10th. Every day brought attacks. Every night brought alerts. The crew slept in shifts. Nobody slept well. 24 hours earlier, McCool had watched a different kamikaze attack unfold. June 10th, 08:15. A lone VAL dive bomber dropped through clouds without warning, headed straight for USS William D. Porter, Fletcher-class destroyer. Crew of 273 men. The Porter's guns opened fire. 5-inch shells, 40mm rounds. The VAL took multiple hits but kept coming. The destroyer turned hard to starboard. The kamikaze missed by 30 feet, splashed into the ocean. Then the VAL exploded directly beneath the ship. The underwater blast lifted the Porter completely out of the water. She crashed back down. Power failed. Steam lines ruptured throughout the ship. Fires erupted in 3 compartments. The destroyer began listing to starboard within minutes. Her crew fought the damage for 3 hours. Pumps failed. Flooding increased. At 1100 hours, the commanding officer gave the order to abandon ship. McCool brought LCS-122 alongside the burning destroyer. Nearly 300 men needed evacuation. His crew worked for 3 hours straight, pulling sailors from the water, treating burns and shrapnel wounds, loading the injured onto stretchers. The Porter rolled over and sank stern first 12 minutes after the last man stepped off. Not a single fatality. McCool's crew had saved every soul aboard. That rescue earned recognition from the task force commander, but it also marked McCool's ship. The Japanese knew Station 15 now. They knew which ships responded to attacks. They knew LCS-122 carried firepower, and they knew McCool wouldn't abandon his position. If you want to see how McCool handled what came next, please hit that like button. It helps us share more forgotten stories of courage. Subscribe if you haven't already. Back to McCool. The evening of June 11th arrived with clear skies, perfect visibility. McCool's ship held the northernmost position in a diamond formation. 3 other LCS ships spread out below him. The nearest destroyer sat 3 miles away. If kamikazes came from the north, they would reach McCool first. His guns would be the first line of defense. His ship would be the first target. The radar operator called out a contact at 1800 hours. Multiple aircraft, bearing 350, range 12 miles, closing fast. McCool ordered his gun crews to battle stations. 65 men rushed to their positions. The 40mm crews loaded fresh ammunition drums. The 20mm gunners checked their sights. Below deck, damage control teams readied fire hoses and foam equipment. Everyone knew the drill. Everyone knew the odds. 3 VAL dive bombers broke through the clouds at 6,000 feet. They came in low, fast. McCool's gunners opened fire at 4,000 yards. The lead VAL took hits across its wings and fuselage. It kept coming, smoke trailing, wings shredded, still flying. The first VAL passed 8 feet above the forward deckhouse. McCool felt the displaced air. The kamikaze's wheels nearly clipped the number 1 40mm gun mount. The gunner ducked. The plane crashed into the water 100 yards off the port bow. It exploded on impact. Water and debris shot 200 feet into the air. McCool's attention snapped to the remaining 2 aircraft, both diving now. The second valve came in from starboard. All 5 40mm mounts tracked it. Guns 2, 3, 5, and 7 poured fire into the approaching bomber. Tracers ripped through the cockpit canopy. The greenhouse shattered. The valve's engine started smoking. Black smoke, heavy smoke. But the pilot held his dive angle. The third valve stayed higher, circling, waiting. McCool divided his attention between both threats. The second valve closed to 1,000 yards, 500 yards. The 20mm cannons joined the barrage, every gun on the ship firing. Shell casings littered the deck. The noise became continuous, deafening. The valve's left wing caught fire. Pieces of the aircraft started falling away. Armor plating, control surfaces. The plane wobbled but maintained course. It was aimed directly at the conning tower, directly at McCool's position. At 200 yards, McCool saw the pilot, young, maybe 20 years old, wrapped in a white headband. The kamikaze's bomb hung visible beneath the fuselage. 500 pounds. Contact fuse. If it detonated on impact, the explosion would destroy the entire forward section of LCS-122. McCool braced for impact. The valve struck the starboard side of the ship at the base of the conning tower. Metal screamed. The aircraft's fuselage crumpled. The bomb penetrated the radio shack and punched through the opposite side of the ship before exploding in the water. The blast wave hit the hull from outside, not inside. That single detail saved the vessel, but fire consumed everything. Burning aviation fuel spread across the deck. The radio shack erupted in flames. Ammunition began cooking off. 20mm rounds exploded in random directions. Pyrotechnic flares ignited. White phosphorus burned at 4,000 degrees. The conning tower filled with smoke and heat. The blast knocked McCool unconscious. He came to seconds later, maybe 10 seconds, maybe 30. Time felt distorted. He was alone in the conning tower. Everyone else had been blown clear or killed. He tried to stand. His right side wouldn't respond properly. He looked down. His uniform was shredded. Blood soaked through. Burns covered his right arm and torso. Shrapnel had penetrated in multiple places. The fire below intensified. McCool could hear it. The roar of flames, the crack of ammunition, the screams of wounded men. He tried the ladder. His legs barely worked. He grabbed the ladder rail with his left hand and lowered himself down. Each movement sent waves of pain through his chest. He dropped onto the main deck. Fire surrounded the amidships section. The damage control team fought the blaze with foam and water, but the fire kept spreading. Moving toward the rocket launchers, 120 rockets. If those detonated, the ship would disintegrate. McCool found his chief engineer near the forward gun mount. The man's face was covered in soot. McCool gave orders through gritted teeth. Flood the forward magazines. Seal the aft compartments. Keep water on those rockets. The engineer nodded and ran. McCool moved aft. Each step took enormous effort. His right lung felt wrong, heavy, like breathing through water. He looked up at the conning tower. The entire structure was engulfed in flames. Then he saw movement inside. 2 men, trapped in the burning deckhouse, trying to get out, failing. The fire reached toward the rocket launchers. 30 feet away, 20 feet. McCool had seconds to decide. Save the trapped men or protect the rockets. He turned toward the flames. McCool pushed through the smoke toward the burning deckhouse. The heat hit him like a physical barrier. His burns screamed. Every breath pulled hot air into his damaged lung. He could taste blood in his mouth. Copper. Thick. He kept moving. The deckhouse doorway was blocked by twisted metal from the kamikaze impact. Flames poured from the opening. Inside, one man lay pinned under debris. Another crouched beside him, trying to lift the collapsed beam. Neither could escape without help. The fire gave them maybe 30 seconds. McCool grabbed the twisted metal doorframe. The hot steel burned through what remained of his gloves. He pulled. The frame didn't move. He repositioned his grip and pulled again. The metal gave slightly. Not enough. His right arm barely functioned. He switched to his left hand and threw his full body weight backward. The frame broke free. The doorway cleared. McCool stumbled into the compartment. Smoke choked him immediately. Zero visibility. He dropped to his knees where the air was slightly clearer, found the first sailor by touch. The man was conscious, badly burned, trapped under a section of the bulkhead. McCool tried to lift the beam. His right side refused to cooperate. The weight was too much for one arm. The second sailor joined him. Together they lifted. 6 inches. 8 inches. The trapped man pulled himself free. His legs were shattered. He couldn't walk. McCool hooked his left arm under the injured sailor's shoulders and dragged him toward the door. Each movement sent agony through his chest. The burning sensation in his lung intensified. He coughed. Blood came up. Not a good sign. Possibly a punctured lung. Possibly worse. He kept dragging. They reached the doorway. McCool handed the injured man to waiting crewmen outside. They pulled him clear. 1 down, 1 to go. McCool turned back into the flames. The second sailor had found the exit on his own. He emerged, coughing, disoriented, but alive. McCool counted. 2 rescued. He tried to stand fully upright. Couldn't. His chest felt like it was caving in. Each breath brought less oxygen, more blood. His vision started narrowing. The chief engineer appeared beside him, grabbed his arm, tried to lead him away from the fire. McCool pulled free, pointed at the rocket launchers. The engineer nodded, already handling it. Water poured onto the rockets from 3 different hoses. The fire line had stopped advancing, for now. McCool looked around his ship. Flames still consumed the midship section. The conning tower was completely destroyed. The radio shack was gone. Bodies lay on the deck, some moving, some not. The medical corpsmen worked frantically on the wounded. Too many wounded, not enough corpsmen. Then McCool remembered the 3rd valve, the one that had circled higher. He scanned the sky, found it, still up there, banking, coming around for another run, headed straight for LCS-122. His gun crews saw it too. The undamaged mounts swung to track the new threat, but half his firepower was gone. The forward 40mm was damaged. The midships guns were surrounded by fire. Only the aft weapons remained fully operational. Not enough. Not nearly enough to stop a determined kamikaze. McCool tried to move toward the aft gun director. His legs gave out. He collapsed onto the deck. The chief engineer caught him. McCool's chest filled with fluid. He couldn't breathe properly, couldn't speak. He pointed at the approaching Val. The engineer understood. He ran toward the gun crews, shouting orders. McCool lay on the deck watching the kamikaze descend. The pilot had seen everything, seen the damage, seen the fires, seen the chaos. He knew LCS-122 was crippled. Easy target. The Val dropped from 4,000 feet into its final dive, smoke still trailing from its damaged engine. But it was coming. Fast. The aft 40mm mount opened fire. Tracers reached up toward the diving bomber. McCool watched the shells climb, watched them connect, watched pieces of the Val start breaking away. But the plane kept diving, closer. 500 yards, 300 yards. McCool's surviving crew scrambled for cover. The Val's trajectory brought it directly over the damaged midship section, over the rocket launchers, over the fire. If the kamikaze hit those rockets, everyone died. Gun 7 tracked the 3rd valve through its dive. The gunner fired in sustained bursts. 50 rounds, 75 rounds. Tracers walked up the kamikaze's fuselage. The valve's right wing caught fire. The aircraft shuddered. Its dive angle steepened. Too steep. The pilot had lost control. The kamikaze missed the ship by 40 yards. It plunged into the ocean off the starboard quarter. The explosion sent a column of water higher than the mast. Debris rained down on the aft deck. But no direct hit. No secondary explosion. The rockets remained intact. McCool tried to breathe. Failed. His chest felt like it was collapsing from the inside. Blood filled his mouth. He turned his head and coughed. Dark blood. Frothy blood. His right lung had definitely collapsed, possibly hemorrhaging. He needed immediate evacuation. But no help was coming yet. The other LCS ships were engaging their own targets. The destroyers were 3 miles away. LCS-122 was on its own. The fire in the midship section continued burning. Damage control teams fought it from 3 sides. Water, foam, sand. Nothing seemed adequate. The flames had found fuel lines. Oil spread across the deck. The fire followed, moving toward undamaged sections, threatening the forward magazine. If that magazine detonated, the bow would separate from the rest of the ship. The chief engineer organized bucket brigades. Men passed water hand to hand. Primitive, but effective. The fire's advance slowed, then stopped, then began retreating. Slowly, inch by inch, the crew pressed the advantage. More water, more foam. The flames diminished. McCool watched from the deck, unable to help, unable to move. His vision kept fading to gray at the edges. He forced himself to stay conscious, counted his crew, counted the bodies. 12 men lay motionless. 23 more were wounded, some critically. His medical corpsman had set up a triage station near the aft deckhouse. The worst cases went there. The walking wounded helped fight fires. The battle had lasted 11 minutes from first contact to the third valve's destruction. 11 minutes. But it felt like hours. McCool's entire body trembled, shock setting in, blood loss, burns covering 30% of his right side, shrapnel wounds in 7 places, collapsed lung, internal bleeding. He was dying. He knew it. His crew knew it. But the ship was still afloat. Another LCS appeared through the smoke, LCS-84. She came alongside carefully. Her commanding officer surveyed the damage, the burning wreckage, the casualties, the destroyed conning tower. He immediately ordered medical assistance transferred. 2 corpsmen jumped across with supplies, stretchers, plasma, morphine. They reached McCool first, checked his vitals, started an IV. The senior corpsman looked at McCool's chest and shook his head. Punctured lung, probable internal hemorrhaging, maybe worse. He needed surgery, real surgery, hospital surgery, not what could be provided on a small landing craft. The corpsman tried to move McCool to a stretcher. He resisted, pointed at his wounded crew. They needed attention first. The corpsman ignored him. Orders from above. The commanding officer goes first, always. McCool tried to argue. No breath to argue with. The corpsman lifted him onto the stretcher. They carried him across to LCS-84. The transfer took 3 minutes. Careful work. The seas were calm. Lucky. Any swell would have complicated the evacuation. McCool looked back at his ship as they moved him. LCS-122 was still burning, still fighting, still afloat. His crew lined the rail, watching their captain leave. Some saluted, some just stared. Most had tears in their eyes. McCool reached LCS-84's deck. They carried him below to the crew quarters, laid him on a bunk. The corpsman cut away what remained of his uniform. The damage underneath looked worse in proper light. Burns, deep burns, 3rd degree in places. Shrapnel embedded in his shoulder, his ribs, his abdomen. Blood continued seeping from multiple wounds. The corpsman administered morphine, started a second IV, checked McCool's breathing. Still labored, still bloody. The collapsed lung needed immediate attention. But LCS-84 had no surgical capability, no chest tubes, no proper equipment. They could only stabilize him, keep him alive until proper medical facilities arrived. McCool faded in and out of consciousness. Pain, morphine, shock, everything blurred together. He heard voices, distant voices, talking about casualties, talking about damage, talking about him. Not expected to survive. Too much internal damage, too much blood loss. They were wrong. He would survive. He had to. His crew needed him. His ship needed him. A destroyer arrived 2 hours later. USS Cassin Young, Fletcher class, full medical facilities, real doctors, real operating equipment. The transfer happened at 2200 hours. Seas had picked up, 3-foot swells. The stretcher swung dangerously as they hoisted McCool across. He remained semi-conscious, aware but disconnected. The morphine helped. Not enough. The destroyer's chief medical officer examined McCool immediately. 28 years old, Naval Academy graduate, 3 years of combat experience. He had seen hundreds of casualties. This one was bad. Collapsed right lung, severe burns requiring immediate debridement, multiple shrapnel wounds, possible liver damage, probable internal bleeding, blood pressure dropping, heart rate elevated, signs of hypovolemic shock advancing. They moved McCool into the ship's medical bay, cut away the field dressings. The burns underneath had already started blistering. Infection was inevitable without proper treatment. The doctor ordered plasma, antibiotics, sulfa powder on the burns. He examined the shrapnel wounds. 7 entrance points, 4 exit wounds, 3 pieces still embedded, 1 near the spine, 1 in the shoulder, One lodged somewhere in the abdominal cavity. X-rays would be needed to locate them precisely. The doctor worked on the collapsed lung first, inserted a chest tube without anesthesia. McCool was too unstable for general anesthesia, too much blood loss. The tube went in through the ribs. McCool arched his back, made no sound, couldn't make sound, no air for screaming. The tube began draining immediately. Blood, air, fluid. The lungs started re-expanding, slowly, partially, not fully. Damage was extensive. Back at Station 15, LCS-122 continued fighting fires. 3 hours after the attack, the flames were finally contained. Not extinguished, contained. Hotspots remained throughout the midship section. The crew maintained constant watch. Water ready, foam ready. The rocket launchers had survived intact. The forward magazine remained sealed and undamaged. The ship would not explode. Not tonight. The conning tower was completely destroyed. Twisted metal, melted equipment, charred bodies. 4 men had died there instantly. The radio shack no longer existed. Communication equipment was gone. The ship could receive messages, but not transmit. LCS-122 was effectively mute. She could fight, but not call for help. The damage assessment took until dawn. 12 confirmed dead, 23 wounded seriously enough to require evacuation, 15 men with minor injuries who remained on duty. The ship's structure was compromised, but intact. She could navigate under her own power. Steering responded, engines functioned, but combat capability was severely reduced. 3 gun mounts were damaged beyond field repair. Half the 20mm cannons were destroyed. The fire control system was gone. A repair vessel arrived at 0600 on June 12th. She came alongside and began emergency work. Welding, cutting, shoring up damaged bulkheads. The goal was not restoration, just stabilization. Make LCS-122 seaworthy enough to reach port. Get her off the picket line. Get her crew to safety. McCool remained on Young through the night. The medical officer checked on him every hour. Blood pressure stabilized slightly. Breathing improved marginally. The chest tube continued draining. Too much fluid. Too much blood. The lung was damaged internally. Torn tissue. Possibly punctured by rib fragments during the blast. Surgery would be required. Real surgery. Hospital surgery. Not what could be provided on a destroyer. At 0830 on June 12th, a hospital ship was scheduled to arrive in the area. USS Solace. Fully equipped surgical facilities. Experienced trauma surgeons. Blood supplies. Everything McCool needed. She was 17 hours away. Steaming north from the main fleet anchorage, McCool had to survive 17 more hours. The doctor doubted he would make it. The internal bleeding showed no signs of stopping. The collapsed lung wasn't responding to treatment. Infection was already developing in the burns. McCool's body temperature climbed. 101 degrees, 102. Fever, sepsis starting. Without proper antibiotics, without surgical intervention, he had maybe 24 hours, maybe less. The doctor sat beside McCool's bunk, checked his pulse. Weak, thready, irregular. He looked at the young lieutenant's face, 23 years old, younger than the doctor. McCool had saved 300 men 24 hours ago, saved his own crew 6 hours ago, entered flames with a collapsed lung to rescue trapped sailors, and now he was dying on a destroyer bunk because help was 17 hours away. The doctor made a decision. McCool wouldn't wait 17 hours. He would request immediate air evacuation, get McCool to Guam, get him to a real hospital, get him surgery before the internal bleeding killed him. He left the medical bay and headed for the radio room, then remembered. The main radio was being repaired, battle damage from a kamikaze attack 3 days earlier. Nothing was simple in this war. Nothing was easy. The doctor found the communications officer on the bridge, explained the situation. McCool needed immediate evacuation, air transport to Guam. The communications officer checked his charts. Nearest airfield with medical evacuation capability was on Ieshima, small island west of Okinawa, 43 miles away. They could request a PBY Catalina, flying ambulance, but approval would take hours, maybe 6 hours, maybe more. McCool didn't have 6 hours. The destroyer's commanding officer made the call. Young would break from picket duty and run for Ieshima at flank speed. 38 knots, 90 minutes. Get McCool to the airfield. Get him on a plane. Get him to Guam, where surgeons could save him. The decision violated standing orders. Picket ships did not abandon their stations, ever. But the commanding officer had seen McCool's Medal of Honor recommendation, had read the report about the Porter rescue, had heard about the rescue of his own crew under fire. Some rules could be bent. Cassin Young came about at 09:15, her engines pushed to maximum power. The destroyer carved through calm seas at 36 knots. The medical officer stayed with McCool, monitoring, adjusting. The chest tube continued draining. McCool's fever climbed to 103 degrees. Delirium set in. He spoke occasionally, fragments, names, his crew, his ship, the porter. None of it made sense. The morphine and fever mixed badly. At Ieshima, a PBY Catalina was already being prepared. The airfield's medical staff had received advance notice. Stretcher, plasma. 2 Navy corpsmen trained in flight evacuation. The plane could reach Guam in 4 hours. The hospital there had 3 surgeons, full operating theater, blood bank, everything required for complex chest surgery. Cassin Young arrived off Ieshima at 10:47. A small boat came alongside. They transferred McCool carefully. The seas remained calm. The transfer went smoothly. The boat reached shore 8 minutes later. An ambulance waited at the dock. They drove McCool directly to the airfield. 2 miles. Rough road. Every bump sent pain through his chest despite the morphine. The chest tube pulled. The shrapnel wounds reopened. Fresh blood soaked through the bandages. The PBY sat ready on the taxiway, engines already running. The crew had filed their flight plan. Direct route to Guam. 4 hours, 12 minutes estimated flight time. Weather looked favorable. Clear skies. Light winds. The corpsman loaded McCool aboard, secured him to the stretcher, started another plasma drip, the third one in 12 hours. He had lost massive amounts of blood. His body couldn't produce replacement fast enough. The PBY lifted off at 11:20. McCool remained semi-conscious. The flight surgeon checked his vitals. Blood pressure had dropped again, 70/40, critically low. Heart rate was 132, too fast. Labored breathing continued despite the chest tube. The collapsed lung wasn't fully re-expanding, possibly too much internal damage, possibly beyond repair. 2 hours into the flight, McCool's condition deteriorated sharply. His blood pressure crashed, 50/30. His heart rhythm became irregular, possible cardiac involvement. The shrapnel near his spine might have caused spinal shock, or the blood loss had simply exceeded what his body could tolerate. The flight surgeon prepared emergency cardiac medications, epinephrine, atropine, ready if McCool's heart stopped. Back at Okinawa, LCS-122 limped toward the main anchorage, engines at half speed. Fires finally extinguished after 18 hours of continuous firefighting. The repair vessel escorted her, ready to assist if flooding worsened or if structural damage caused failure. The crew worked in shifts, exhausted, traumatized. 12 of their shipmates were dead. 23 more were evacuated. Their captain was dying somewhere between Ieshima and Guam. Nobody knew if he would survive. The news about McCool's evacuation spread through the task force. Other ships radioed inquiries, asked for updates. The story of the Porter rescue had already become legend. 300 sailors saved without a single loss. Now the same officer had saved his own crew while dying from his wounds, had entered flames with a collapsed lung, had refused evacuation until his men were treated. The fleet wanted to know if he would live. At 13:32, the PBY was still 90 minutes from Guam. McCool's blood pressure remained critically low. His breathing had become shallow, irregular. The flight surgeon administered more plasma, more epinephrine. McCool's eyes opened briefly, unfocused. He tried to speak. No words came out, just blood. The surgeon wiped it away. McCool's eyes closed again. The surgeon checked his watch. 90 minutes to Guam, 90 minutes to surgery. 90 minutes McCool might not have. His heart could stop any moment. His breathing could cease. The internal bleeding could overwhelm what little blood pressure remained. The surgeon prepared for the worst. Prepared to start chest compressions at 30,000 feet in a flying boat with no proper equipment and no hope of success. McCool's pulse weakened. 70 beats per minute. 60. 50. The surgeon placed his hand on McCool's neck, felt the carotid artery, barely palpable. He looked at the corpsman, told him to prepare the epinephrine. The PBY touched down at Guam at 15:47. An ambulance waited on the tarmac, engines running. 2 surgeons stood beside it. They had received updates during the flight, knew what was coming. Collapsed lung, internal bleeding, burns, shrapnel wounds, severe blood loss, possible cardiac involvement. They loaded McCool immediately. No pause, no assessment. Straight to the operating theater. The Naval Hospital Guam occupied a sprawling complex near Apra Harbor. 12 operating rooms, 50 surgeons, 200 nurses. The facility handled 300 casualties daily, wounded from Okinawa, wounded from kamikaze attacks, wounded from the grinding land battle that had entered its 11th week. McCool was one case among hundreds, but his case was critical. They rolled him into Operating Theater 7 at 16:03. A team of 4 surgeons scrubbed in. The chief surgeon was Commander James Harrington, 42 years old, Johns Hopkins Medical School, 15 years of surgical experience, 6 months at Guam. He had performed 237 chest surgeries since January, lost 41 patients, 82% survival rate, better than most, not good enough for this case. Harrington examined McCool quickly. Blood pressure 60/35, heart rate 140, respiratory rate 32 breaths per minute, fever 104 degrees. Sepsis had progressed significantly. The burns were infected. The shrapnel wounds showed signs of necrosis. The collapsed lung had partially re-expanded but remained compromised. Internal bleeding continued, somewhere in the abdominal cavity, possibly the liver, possibly the spleen, possibly both. The anesthesiologist shook his head. McCool was too unstable for general anesthesia. His blood pressure couldn't handle it. His heart might stop. But they couldn't operate without it. Harrington made a decision. Regional blocks. Spinal anesthesia for the abdominal work. Local infiltration for the chest. Keep McCool semi-conscious. Risky. Extremely risky. But the only option. The surgery began at 16:28. Harrington opened McCool's abdomen first. Found blood immediately. Dark blood. Old blood. The bleeding had slowed but not stopped. He traced it to the liver. A shrapnel fragment had punctured the right lobe, 3 centimeters deep. The liver was actively oozing. Harrington packed the wound, applied pressure, waited. The bleeding slowed. He sutured carefully, reinforced with additional packing. The liver would heal if infection didn't set in. The second shrapnel fragment was lodged near the spine. Too close to major vessels, too dangerous to remove. Harrington left it. Better to let scar tissue encapsulate it than risk paralysis or fatal hemorrhage during extraction. The third fragment had passed through muscle tissue and exited. Clean wound, no internal damage. The chest surgery took longer. Harrington drained the remaining fluid from the lung cavity. 1 liter. Dark red. The lung tissue was badly bruised. Multiple small tears. 1 large laceration along the lower lobe. He repaired what he could. Sutured the tears. Reinforced with pledgets. The lung would never function at full capacity again. Maybe 70%. Maybe less. But it would function. The burns required extensive debridement. Dead tissue removed. Cleaned. Dressed with sulfa powder and petroleum gauze. 3rd-degree burns covered McCool's entire right side from shoulder to hip. The skin would need grafting eventually, multiple grafts, but not today. Today was about survival, not restoration. The surgery lasted 4 hours and 17 minutes. Harrington closed at 20:45. McCool's vital signs had remained stable throughout, barely. His blood pressure never rose above 70 systolic. His heart rate stayed elevated, but he lived. Against every statistical probability, he lived. They moved McCool to the intensive care ward, 12 beds, all occupied, mostly burn victims, mostly kamikaze casualties. The nurses worked in constant rotation, checking vitals, changing dressings, administering medications. Morphine every 4 hours, penicillin every 6 hours, plasma as needed. McCool required continuous monitoring. His condition remained critical for 72 hours. On June 15th, his fever broke. 104 degrees dropped to 99. His blood pressure stabilized at 90/60. Still low, but sustainable. His breathing improved. The chest tube drainage decreased. The burns showed no further signs of infection. The antibiotics were working. His body was fighting back. McCool remained semi-conscious for 5 more days. Morphine fog, fever dreams, fragments of memory. The kamikaze, The fire, his crew, the trapped sailors, the rockets, everything mixed together, reality and nightmare. He couldn't separate them. Didn't try. On June 20th, McCool fully regained consciousness. A nurse stood beside his bed. She smiled, told him where he was, told him he had survived, told him about the surgery, the liver, the lung, the burns. She didn't tell him about the 12 men who died on his ship. She didn't tell him about the Medal of Honor recommendation that had already been submitted. She didn't tell him that his actions off Okinawa had saved not just 300 lives in one day, but had established new standards for small ship commanders under kamikaze attack that would save thousands more in the months ahead. She simply told him he was alive, and that his crew was asking about him. McCool spent the next 11 months in hospitals, June through August at Guam, September through November at Pearl Harbor, December through April at Oak Knoll Naval Hospital in California. The burns healed slowly, required 4 separate skin graft operations. The shrapnel near his spine remained embedded, too dangerous to remove. He would carry it for the rest of his life. His right lung never fully recovered. 71% capacity, enough to function, not enough for full duty. LCS-122 survived. The repair crews at Okinawa worked for 3 weeks, replaced the destroyed conning tower, rebuilt the radio shack, restored the damaged gun mounts. By early July, she returned to active duty. Different commander, different crew assignments, but the same ship. She served through the end of the war, survived 7 more kamikaze attacks, never lost another man. The Battle of Okinawa officially ended on June 22, 1945. 82 days of combat, more than 12,000 American servicemen killed. The Japanese launched nearly 2,000 kamikaze attacks, sank 36 ships, damaged 368 more. Small ships like LCS-122 bore the heaviest burden. They sat closest to the threat, took the first hits, absorbed attacks meant for larger vessels. 4 LCS ships were sunk at Okinawa. 14 more were damaged beyond repair. The crews who served on them had mortality rates exceeding infantry units. McCool's actions on June 10th and 11th established new protocols for small ship damage control under kamikaze attack. His decision to enter flames with a collapsed lung became case study material at naval training schools. His prioritization of crew rescue over personal safety influenced command doctrine for decades. The Navy studied what he did right, what his crew did right, how LCS-122 survived when others didn't. President Harry Truman presented McCool with the Medal of Honor on December 18, 1945. White House ceremony. McCool stood in his dress uniform, right side still bandaged under his shirt, breathing still labored. Truman read the citation aloud, spoke about gallantry, spoke about sacrifice, spoke about the young officers who held the line when everything fell apart. McCool saluted, said nothing. There was nothing to say. McCool remained in the Navy, rose to the rank of captain, served in Korea, served in Vietnam, 30 years of service, retired in 1974. He never spoke publicly about June 11th, never gave interviews, never wrote memoirs. The Medal of Honor sat in a drawer. The memories stayed locked away. Some things were too heavy to share. Richard Miles McCool Jr. died on March 5, 2008, Bremerton, Washington, 86 years old, his wife and children at his bedside. He was buried at the United States Naval Academy Cemetery in Annapolis, Maryland. Section 43, Row 6, Plot 12. A simple headstone. Name, rank, dates. Medal of Honor. Nothing about the 300 lives saved. Nothing about the flames. Nothing about the collapsed lung. The stone couldn't hold that much history. In February 2019, the Navy announced its newest amphibious transport dock would be named USS Richard M. McCool Jr., hull number LPD-29, San Antonio class, 684 feet long, crew of 360. The ship is scheduled for commissioning in 2026. She will carry Marines into combat, support amphibious operations, serve in both Atlantic and Pacific theaters. A fitting legacy for the man who commanded 158 feet of steel and saved everyone aboard. The 120 rockets on LCS-122 never exploded. The fire never reached them. McCool's crew kept water flowing, kept the flames back, gave their captain time to rescue the trapped sailors, gave themselves time to survive. Those rockets represented instant death for 65 men. They sat 30 feet from flames for 40 minutes, but they never detonated. Sometimes survival comes down to 30 feet. Sometimes it comes down to one man willing to enter fire when his lung has already collapsed. Sometimes it comes down to a crew that refuses to abandon their ship, even when abandoning makes sense. McCool saved 300 lives in 24 hours. 12 men died under his command. He carried those 12 names until the day he died. That's the weight of command. That's the cost of heroism. That's what the Medal of Honor means. If this story moved you the way it moved us, do me a favor. Hit that like button. Every single like tells YouTube to show this story to more people. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. We're rescuing forgotten stories from dusty archives every single day. Stories about young officers who saved crews with courage and leadership. Real people, real heroism. Drop a comment right now and tell us where you're watching from. Are you watching from the United States, United Kingdom, Canada, Australia? Our community stretches across the entire world. You're not just a viewer, you're part of keeping these memories alive. Tell us your location. Tell us if someone in your family served. Just let us know you're here. Thank you for watching, and thank you for making sure Richard McCool doesn't disappear into silence. These men deserve to be remembered, and you're helping make that happen.